My name is Rosa, 28 years old, and I've built a successful career as an architect in Boston despite my mother's indifference. Ever since my stepsister Gabriella joined our family, I became invisible in my mother's eyes. Last week, I received a gold-embossed invitation to a gala my mother was hosting. I never imagined she would publicly disown me that night, or that I would finally find the courage to speak my truth. Before I share what happened at that gala, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family who tried to erase you. Trust me, what I asked my mother on that stage made the entire room gasp. I once had what seemed like a perfect childhood. Until I was 8, my parents Eleanor and Thomas appeared happily married. We lived in a cozy suburban house in Connecticut with a tire swing in the backyard where Dad would push me for hours. Mum would bake chocolate chip cookies on Sundays and we'd eat them warm while playing board games. I remember feeling completely secure in their love. Everything changed when Dad announced he was leaving. There was no dramatic fight or tearful goodbye scene like in the movies. He simply told me one evening that he and Mum weren't going to live together anymore. I didn't understand the concept of growing apart or the complexities of adult relationships. All I knew was that my father was packing his bags. "I'll see you all the time, Rosebud," he promised, using his special nickname for me. This changes nothing between us. But those visits became increasingly rare, first weekly, then monthly, then merely on major holidays. Eventually, they stopped altogether when he moved to California for a job opportunity when I was 10. The occasional birthday card with a $20 bill was the most consistent presence he maintained in my life. Mum changed after the divorce. The woman who once sang while cooking dinner became silent and withdrawn. She worked longer hours at her real estate office, leaving me with a rotating cast of babysitters. When she was home, she seemed distracted, often staring blankly at the television or scrolling through dating apps on her phone. "Mum, want to see the A I got on my science project?" I'd ask. "That's nice, honey," she'd reply without looking up. When I was 11, Eleanor met Richard Wallace at a charity fundraiser. He was a wealthy businessman who owned a chain of high-end furniture stores across New England. Suddenly, Mum was transformed. She laughed again. She bought new clothes. She started caring about her appearance in ways I hadn't seen since before Dad left. 3 months after they met, Richard proposed. 6 months later, we moved into his sprawling colonial mansion in the most prestigious neighborhood in town. And with that move came Gabriella Richards' daughter from his previous marriage, who was exactly my age. I was excited to have a sister. Growing up as an only child had been lonely, especially after Dad left. I imagined us sharing secrets, borrowing each other's clothes, and defending each other against the world. The sister I'd always wanted. "Hi, I'm Rosa," I said the first day we met, extending my hand. "I've never had a sister before. Want to see my book collection?" Gabriella looked at my hand like I was offering her something disgusting. "I already have friends," she said, turning away. "And I'm not your sister." That first rejection set the tone for our relationship. While I continued making efforts to connect, Gabriella made it clear she saw me as an unwelcome intruder. She excluded me from conversations, forgot to tell me about plans, and subtly mocked my clothes, my interests, and even the way I spoke. What hurt more than Gabriella's rejection was watching my mother's attention gradually shift toward her. Eleanor seemed captivated by Gabriella's conventional beauty and social savvy. While I was reserved and academic, preferring books and art to shopping and gossip, Gabriella was outgoing and effortlessly popular. "Gabriella has such natural poise," Mum would say admiringly. "She gets that from her mother." I threw myself into academics and art areas where Gabriella showed little interest. I joined the debate team, won the school art competition 3 years running, and maintained straight A's. Each achievement felt like a silent plea to my mother. See me, choose me, love me. But Mum's attention remained fixed on Gabriella. When I brought home my report card full of A's, Mum would nod absently. When Gabriella brought home C's and the occasional B, Mum praised her progress and took her shopping as a reward. "You're just naturally smart, Rosa," she'd say if I pointed out the disparity. "Gabriella has to work harder for her grades." By high school, the pattern was firmly established. Gabriella was the daughter my mother had always wanted. I was the obligation she had inherited from a failed marriage. Richard was kind to me in his distant way, providing materially for both daughters equally, but he was often traveling for business and deferred to Eleanor on matters of parenting. During my junior year, I won a prestigious national art competition that came with a $5,000 scholarship. The award ceremony was scheduled the same weekend as Gabriella's regional cheerleading competition. There was never any question about which event my mother would attend. "You understand, don't you, Rosa?" Mum said. "Gabriella really needs the support. You'll be fine on your own. You always are." I attended my ceremony alone, accepted my award to applause from strangers, and took myself out for dinner afterward. My art teacher drove me home since Mum had taken our only car to Gabriella's competition 3 states away. When I was accepted to a prestigious architecture program on a full academic scholarship, Mum's response was, "That's nice, but are you sure about architecture? It's such a male-dominated field." 2 weeks later, when Gabriella got accepted to a mid-tier state college with no particular academic focus, Mom threw a lavish party complete with catered food and personalized decorations. "My brilliant girl is going to college," she announced to everyone who would listen. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in architecture and environmental design. Mum and Richard attended my graduation, but left immediately after the ceremony to help Gabriella move apartments after she dropped out of her second attempt at college. Despite the lack of family support, I secured a position at Harrington and Associates, one of the most prestigious architecture firms in Boston. I worked 80-hour weeks, lived on ramen noodles in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates, and gradually built my reputation in the field. Through it all, I kept trying to earn my mother's approval and attention. I'd send her pictures of my projects, invite her to visit my firm's open houses, call on Sundays to share my small victories. Her responses were always the same, polite interest, followed by lengthy updates about Gabriella's latest endeavours, regardless of how minor they might be. "That's nice that you got that promotion, Rosa," she'd say. "Did I tell you Gabriella is thinking about opening an online boutique? Richard is going to help her with the startup costs." The boutique never materialized, just like the jewelry design course, the yoga teacher training the real estate license, and the countless other projects Gabriella started and abandoned over the years. Yet each new venture was celebrated and supported as if it were the most important achievement in the world. By the time I turned 28, I had learned to stop expecting anything different. Today I live in a sunny loft apartment in Boston's South End, a space I designed and renovated myself. My walls are covered with artwork from local artists, and large windows overlook a small community garden where I volunteer on weekends. It's a peaceful sanctuary reflective of the independent life I've built for myself. At Harrington and Associates, I've risen to senior architect in record time. My colleagues respect me for my innovative designs and attention to detail. Last month, the Boston Architectural Society named me one of their Rising Stars Under 30 for my work incorporating sustainable materials into affordable housing projects. The most consistent source of emotional support in my life is my best friend Amelia, whom I met during my first year at the architecture firm when we were both junior associates. She's witnessed my struggle with family dynamics from the beginning and has become the sister I always wished for. "You know what I love about you, Rosa," Amelia said during our weekly wine night. "You never let your family drama define you. You just keep building beautiful things despite it all." 3 months ago, I won a highly competitive design competition for a new community art centre in downtown Boston. The project will be featured in several major architecture publications and could define my career for years to come. When I called my mother to share the news, her response was predictable. "That's nice, honey. Did I tell you Gabriella has been seeing someone new? He's a hedge fund manager. Richard thinks he might be serious about her." These interactions happen against the backdrop of obligatory family gatherings several times a year. Thanksgiving at Richard and Eleanor's house, Christmas Eve dinner, the occasional birthday celebration. Each event follows the same pattern. Gabriella is the center of attention, while I exist on the periphery, making polite conversation and leaving as soon as socially acceptable. Last Christmas, Gabriella announced she had been hired at Richard's company in an ambiguous executive role created specifically for her. "I'm so proud of you for joining the family business," Eleanor gushed, squeezing Gabriella's hand across the dinner table. "I always knew you were meant for great things." I sat quietly cutting my turkey into increasingly smaller pieces. Earlier that day, I had mentioned my firm winning the bid for a major waterfront development project, a contract worth millions that I had helped secure. No one had acknowledged it. "Rosa designed that new apartment complex on Riverside Drive," Richard said suddenly. "The one with the curved glass facade. It was in the Business Journal." I looked up, surprised by his rare recognition of my work. "Oh," Eleanor said, barely glancing at me before turning back to Gabriella. "Tell us more about your new office, sweetheart. Did they decorate it the way you wanted? Richard caught my eye and gave a small apologetic shrug. It was one of the few times I felt he truly saw the dynamic at play, though he never did anything substantive to address it. My therapist, Dr. Marshall, has been instrumental in helping me establish boundaries with my family. Our weekly sessions provide a space to process the complex emotions surrounding my relationship with my mother and stepsister. Family relationships exist on a spectrum, Dr. Marshall explained during a particularly difficult session after a tense Easter brunch. You can love someone while acknowledging they're not capable of giving you what you need. The question becomes, what level of interaction is healthy for you to maintain? It's a question I've struggled with for years. Part of me still yearns for the maternal love and recognition I never received. Another part recognizes that continuing to seek approval from someone incapable of providing it is a recipe for ongoing hurt. My boyfriend James has been clear about his opinion on the matter. We met at an industry networking event 2 years ago, and he's witnessed enough family interactions to form a judgment. They don't deserve you, he said after driving me home from a particularly difficult family dinner. I hate watching how they make you invisible. You shine so brightly everywhere else in the world, and they can't even see it. The last family gathering I attended was a dinner celebrating Richard's 60th birthday. I brought an expensive bottle of his favourite scotch and a framed architectural rendering I'd created of his childhood home based on old photographs. Richard seemed genuinely touched by the gift. "This is remarkable, Rosa. You've captured it perfectly. I can almost smell my mother's roses from the garden." Eleanor glanced at it briefly. "That's very nice. Gabriella, show everyone the watch you got for your father." Gabriella produced a luxury watch that I knew Richard already owned in a different colour. The fact that Richard had helped her select and purchase it as her gift to him was an open secret. "It's perfect, sweetheart," Eleanor exclaimed. "You always know exactly what your father wants." I excused myself to use the restroom and took several deep breaths, reminding myself of Dr. Marshall's guidance about not internalizing their behavior. When I returned, the conversation had moved on my gift, forgotten on a side table. After that dinner, I made a conscious decision to reduce my contact with my family. I declined the next 2 invitations to Sunday brunch, citing work commitments. I let my mother's calls go to voicemail more often than not. I focused on nurturing the relationships that actually nourished me. Amelia, James, my colleagues, my neighbours. For nearly 2 months, this new boundary system worked well. I felt lighter, more focused, less drained by constant disappointment. My work thrived. My relationship with James deepened. I started taking painting classes again, a passion I'd abandoned during my busiest years at the firm. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Thick cream paper with gold embossing. Inside was an invitation. "Richard and Eleanor Wallace request the pleasure of your company at a gala celebration of family achievement. Black tie. Saturday, June 12th at the Westfield Hotel Grand Ballroom." I stared at it for a long time, trying to decipher its meaning. In all the years I'd known them, Richard and Eleanor had hosted cocktail parties and holiday gatherings, but never anything described as a gala. And what family achievement could possibly warrant such an event? Most confusing of all was why they would include me, given our recent distance. I placed the invitation on my coffee table and tried to ignore the familiar hope rising in my chest that perhaps finally something had changed. The cream-coloured invitation sat on my coffee table for 3 days before I mentioned it to anyone. Its presence felt like a question I wasn't ready to answer, a potential trap I was wary of stepping into. Finally, during our standing Thursday lunch date, I showed it to Amelia. "A gala celebration of family achievement." She read aloud, her eyebrows rising. "That's certainly vague. Any idea what achievement they're celebrating?" I shook my head. "None. Mum hasn't mentioned any special accomplishments during our brief phone calls. Richard's company is doing well, but no better than usual as far as I know." Amelia turned the invitation over in her hands, examining it like a suspicious object. "You know what I think? This has Gabriella written all over it. That hedge fund guy she's been dating, maybe they got engaged." The suggestion made immediate sense. Eleanor would absolutely consider Gabriella's engagement a momentous family achievement worthy of a formal gala. That would explain the sudden formality. I agreed. Mum's been hinting for years that she wants Gabriella to settle down with someone wealthy. "Are you going to go?" Amelia asked, sliding the invitation back across the table. I poked at my salad with my fork. I honestly don't know. Part of me thinks I should just send a nice gift and make up an excuse. Save myself the inevitable disappointment. And the other part still stupidly hopes that someday things will be different, that Mom will see me as equal to Gabriella. I gave a self-deprecating laugh. Pathetic, right? Amelia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Not pathetic, human. We all want our parents' approval no matter how old or successful we get. That evening, I received a call from Richard. This was unusual in itself, as he typically left family communication to Eleanor. "Rosa, I wanted to make sure you got the invitation," so he said after our initial pleasantries. "I did, yes, though I'm not sure what achievement we're celebrating." There was a slight pause. "It's a surprise announcement. I can't say more than that." "I see." Another surprise that nobody had thought to include me in. "I'm not sure if I can make it. I have a big project deadline coming up." "It would mean a lot to your mother if you were there," Richard said, his voice taking on an uncharacteristic urgency. "To all of us, family should be together for important moments." The irony of this statement coming from a family that had consistently made me feel like an afterthought wasn't lost on me. Still, Richard's tone gave me pause. "I'll think about it," I promised. After we hung up, I called James to see if he'd be willing to accompany me if I decided to attend. "Are you sure you want to put yourself through another one of these family showcases?" he asked cautiously. "The last few haven't exactly been good for your mental health." "No, I'm not sure at all," I admitted. But Richard seemed really insistent, and honestly, I'm curious. They've never done anything this formal before. "If you decide to go, of course, I'll be there with you," James said. "Just promise me you'll go in with realistic expectations." That night I brought up the invitation during my therapy session with Dr. Marshall. "What's your gut telling you about this event?" she asked after I explained the situation. "That it's another opportunity to watch my mother fawn over Gabriella. That I'll come home feeling invisible and inadequate, wondering why I keep putting myself through this. And yet you're considering going." I sighed. Part of me wonders if saying no is just another way of letting them dictate my choices. Maybe attending on my terms with James for support, knowing exactly what I'm walking into, is actually the more empowering choice. Dr. Marshall nodded. "There's something to be said for facing difficult situations from a position of strength and awareness. If you do decide to go, what boundaries might you set to protect yourself?" We spent the remainder of the session discussing concrete strategies, arriving fashionably late to minimize awkward mingling time, having a signal with James when I needed emotional support, planning a special post-gala activity to look forward to, and having an exit strategy if things became too difficult. The following day, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online for information about the upcoming gala and found it listed on the society page of the local newspaper's website. The brief mention described it as one of the season's most anticipated events, with over 200 guests expected to attend. This wasn't just a family announcement then, it was a public spectacle. My next discovery was even more revealing. Gabriella had posted several photos on social media of herself meeting with event planners, selecting floral arrangements, and tasting potential menu items. The captions made it clear she'd been involved in planning the gala for months. Whatever was being celebrated, Gabriella was at the centre of it and had been all along. With this knowledge, I made my decision. I would attend not with the hope that things would be different, but with the full understanding that they wouldn't be. I would go as the accomplished, confident woman I had become despite my family's neglect, not as the approval-seeking daughter I had once been. I texted James, "I'm going. Will you be my date?" His response was immediate. "Absolutely. We'll show them exactly who they've been overlooking." The next 2 weeks were filled with preparation. I splurged on a stunning midnight blue gown that made me feel powerful and elegant. I scheduled appointments for hair and makeup. I even spent an afternoon with Amelia practicing responses to potential slights or awkward questions from relatives. The key is to be so spectacularly unbothered that they question their own perceptions, Amelia advised as we role-played scenarios in my living room. You're not there for their approval anymore. You're there as a courtesy to the family you happen to be related to. The night before the gala, I had a vivid anxiety dream where I arrived at the event to find my name missing from the guests list. As security dragged me away, Eleanor looked on with a cold smile saying, "We only invited our real family." I woke up with my heart racing, reminded myself that it was just a dream, and went through my morning meditation routine twice to calm my nerves. Whatever tomorrow brought, I would face it as the architect of my own life, not as the forgotten daughter desperately seeking approval. With that resolution firmly in mind, I finally felt ready. The Westfield Hotel's grand ballroom was transformed for the occasion. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over round tables adorned with towering floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in one corner. Waitstaff in formal attire circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. James whistled softly as we entered. "They went all out," he murmured, adjusting his bow tie. In his tailored tuxedo with his dark hair slicked back, he looked like he belonged on a movie screen. I smoothed the fabric of my midnight blue gown, drawing confidence from the elegant silhouette and the way it highlighted my best features. The dress had been an investment, but standing in that opulent space, I was glad I had chosen something that made me feel equal to anyone in the room. "Rosa, you made it!" Eleanor appeared before us, dressed in an expensive silver gown that complemented her perfectly coiffed hair. Her greeting was cool but polite, her eyes already scanning the room over my shoulder. "The seating chart is by the entrance. I need to check on something with the caterer." And just like that, she was gone, disappearing into the crowd without introducing herself to James or asking a single question about my life. "Well, that was brief and on brand," James commented, taking 2 champagne flutes from a passing server and handing one to me. "I told you to expect nothing different," I replied, taking a fortifying sip. "Let's find our table." As we made our way through the crowd, I spotted Gabriella holding court near the stage area. She wore a designer white gown that screamed bridal adjacent, and an enormous diamond sparkled on her left hand, confirming Amelia's engagement theory. She was surrounded by admirers, laughing dramatically at something someone had said. "Rosa, my goodness, you actually came!" Gabriella's voice carried across the space between us, drawing attention our way. She air-kissed both my cheeks, her expensive perfume momentarily overwhelming. "And who's this handsome man?" I introduced James, watching as Gabriella gave him a once-over that lingered inappropriately long. "Architectural engineer," Gabriella repeated after James explained his profession. "So you two have that whole building thing in common. How cute!" She flashed her engagement ring conspicuously. "Derek and I have finance in common. He's heading up the mergers and acquisitions department at Goldstein Partners." A tall man with an aggressively firm handshake joined us, introducing himself as Gabriella's fiancé. After minimal pleasantries, Gabriella excused them both. "We have to greet some of Daddy's business associates. You understand." As they walked away, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Throughout the ballroom were enlarged family photographs displayed on elegant easels. There were pictures of Eleanor and Richard's wedding, Gabriella's graduation, family vacations, and holidays. I studied each one as we passed, confirming what I already suspected: I wasn't in a single photograph. It was as if my entire existence had been erased from the family narrative. "Rosa," Richard approached, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. "I'm glad you could make it." He shook James's hand warmly. "The architecture business treating you both well." "Very well," I replied. "My firm just won the Harbourview project. Construction starts next month." "That's the mixed-use development on the waterfront. Impressive." Richard seemed genuinely interested. "I read about that project in the Business Journal. They mentioned your innovative use of sustainable materials." For a brief moment, I felt seen and acknowledged. Then Eleanor appeared at Richard's side, her hand gripping his arm possessively. "Richard, the Hendersons just arrived. You need to come greet them." She barely glanced at me. "Rosa, your table is number 15 near the back." "Right." As they walked away, I checked the seating chart. Table 15 was indeed at the furthest point from the head table where Eleanor, Richard, and Gabriella, and presumably Derek, would be seated. We would be sharing a table with distant cousins I barely knew and some business associates I had never met. "Want to make a break for it?" James whispered. We could be eating takeout in our pajamas within the hour. I was tempted, but something kept me rooted in place. "Not yet. I want to see what this is all about." As we made our way to our assigned table, I overheard snippets of conversation that made my chest tighten. Eleanor must be over the moon about her daughter's engagement. The Wallace family business will be in good hands with the next generation. Eleanor's daughter is just as beautiful and charming as she is. All these comments referred to Gabriella as if she were Eleanor's only child. When we reached our table, I encountered one of Eleanor's oldest friends, Margaret, whom I had known since childhood. "Rosa, what a surprise to see you here," Margaret exclaimed. "I didn't realize you were invited." "Why wouldn't I be?" I asked carefully. Margaret looked flustered. Oh, no reason. It's just that when Eleanor talks about her daughter, I assumed... She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. You assumed what? James prompted when Margaret didn't continue. Nothing. It's lovely to see you. You're an architect now, is that right? The conversation moved on, but the implication hung in the air. Even people who had known me my entire life had somehow been led to believe that Eleanor had only one daughter. As dinner was served, I noticed a stage had been set up at the front of the ballroom, complete with a podium and microphone. Whatever announcement was planned, it was going to be a formal affair. My suspicions were confirmed when, after the main course was cleared, Richard tapped his glass for attention and took the stage. Friends, family, colleagues, thank you all for joining us tonight, he began. This is a special evening for our family, and we're honoured to share it with all of you. He spoke briefly about his business success and his pride in the family legacy he had built. Then, with a warm smile, he introduced Eleanor. My mother took the microphone with practiced elegance, her silver gown catching the light as she moved. Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us tonight, she began. As a mother, there is nothing more rewarding than watching your child grow into an exceptional adult who makes you proud every single day. The room fell silent as Eleanor continued, her voice thick with emotion. From the moment she was born, I knew my daughter was special. I've watched her blossom into a beautiful, intelligent, ambitious young woman who embodies everything our family stands for. Eleanor paused, looking out over the crowd with shining eyes. Tonight we celebrate not one, but two momentous occasions. First, my daughter's engagement to a wonderful man who is her perfect match in every way. Polite applause rippled through the room. I felt James's hand find mine under the table, squeezing gently in support. And second, Eleanor continued, an important announcement about our family's future. Richard and I have decided that the time has come to plan for the next generation of leadership at Wallace Furniture Enterprises. She gestured dramatically toward the side of the stage. Please join me in welcoming my daughter Gabriella and her fiancé Derek, who will be joining the executive team effective immediately, with Gabriella being groomed to eventually take over as CEO when Richard retires. Gabriella and Derek walked onto the stage amid enthusiastic applause. Gabriella embraced Eleanor in what appeared to be a heartfelt moment between mother and daughter. I couldn't be prouder of my only daughter, Eleanor declared into the microphone, her arm still around Gabriella. She is the light of my life, my greatest achievement, and the future of everything we've built. My only daughter. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Around me, people continued clapping, oblivious to the fact that Eleanor's biological daughter was sitting among them, erased with 5 simple words. I felt a strange calm wash over me. After years of being overlooked, diminished, and marginalized, Eleanor had finally made her feelings absolutely clear. She had not misspoken or been misunderstood. She had declared to 200 witnesses that I did not exist. James's face was rigid with anger. Rosa, this is beyond unacceptable. Let's go. But something inside me had shifted. The years of seeking approval, of making myself smaller to accommodate their narrative, of accepting the scraps of attention thrown my way, it all crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. No, I said quietly, rising to my feet. Not this time. With deliberate movements, I straightened my gown and began walking toward the stage. The confident click of my heels against the marble floor felt like punctuation marks in the ongoing applause. People began to notice my approach, conversations faltering as heads turned to watch. By the time I reached the edge of the stage, a strange hush had fallen over the section of the room I had traversed. Eleanor was still speaking, describing Gabriella's vision for the company's future when she noticed me standing there. For a fraction of a second, genuine alarm flashed across her face before she composed herself. And now Gabriella would like to say a few words, Eleanor announced, attempting to hand off the microphone and step away. Mum? I said, my voice carrying clearly, despite not having a microphone. I believe I should have a turn to speak too. The room grew quieter. Eleanor froze, microphone still in hand. Rosa, this isn't the time, she hissed, leaning down slightly. We can talk later. Actually, this is exactly the time. I climbed the 3 steps onto the stage with the same confidence I projected in professional presentations. May I extended my hand for the microphone. Eleanor clutched it tighter for a moment, then relented, perhaps realizing that making a scene would only draw more attention. I faced the room full of elegantly dressed guests, many of whom were looking confused or curious about the unscheduled speaker. Taking a deep centering breath, I smiled and spoke clearly into the microphone. Hello everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Rosa Levine, and I have a question for my mother, Eleanor Wallace. I turn to face Eleanor, directly maintaining my composed smile. Mom, since when did you forget giving birth to me 28 years ago? The collective gasp from the audience was audible. Eleanor's face drained of colour. Gabriella's mouth opened in shock. Richard looked down at his shoes, his discomfort evident. Because I couldn't help but notice, I continued, my voice steady, that you just referred to Gabriella as your only daughter. Which is interesting considering I have your mother's name as my middle name, and a birth certificate listing you as my mother. I turned back to address the stunned crowd. I realize many of you may not know me or may be confused right now. Allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Eleanor's biological daughter from her first marriage. I'm an award-winning architect with Harrington and Associates. My most recent project, the Harborview development, was featured in Architectural Digest last month. I graduated summa cum laude from Cornell. And for most of my life, I have tried desperately to earn the love and recognition from my mother that she gives so freely to my stepsister. Eleanor stepped forward, reaching for the microphone. Rosa is exaggerating. Of course I care about both girls equally. I simply misspoke. I held the microphone firmly. Did you misspeak when you didn't include a single photo of me among the family pictures displayed around this room? Did you misspeak when you seated me at the furthest table from the family? Did you misspeak when you told your friends I wouldn't be attending tonight, which is why they were surprised to see me? Eleanor's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Gabriella moved toward her, protectively shooting me a venomous look. I didn't come up here to create a scene. I continued, my voice softening. I came up here because after 28 years of being erased, I deserve to be acknowledged. Not as an obligation or an afterthought, but as a full member of this family. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small photograph I had brought with me. It showed Eleanor holding me as a newborn, looking down at me with genuine love in her eyes. This was us once, I said, holding up the photo for everyone to see. Before status and appearances became more important than authentic connection. Before Gabriella became the daughter you always wanted, and I became the one you struggled to love. I placed the photo on the podium and took a step back. I don't share this to embarrass you, but because pretending is no longer an option. Not for me, and not for anyone in this room who witnessed you disown your own child tonight. Eleanor was visibly shaking now, torn between rage and mortification. Richard finally stepped forward, attempting to take control of the situation. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he began. There's no misunderstanding, Richard, I said gently. You've witnessed this dynamic for years. You've occasionally tried to bridge the gap, and I appreciate those efforts. But we all know what's happening here. I addressed the audience once more. I won't take any more of your evening. I just want to say one final thing. Family isn't just about biological connections or legal ties. It's about who sees you, values you, and loves you unconditionally. I've spent years trying to earn a place in a family that was determined to keep me on the outside. Tonight I'm choosing to stop trying. I handed the microphone back to Richard and made eye contact with Eleanor one last time. Congratulations on Gabriella's engagement and new position. I truly hope it brings you all the happiness you're seeking. With that, I walked off the stage, my head held high. The room remained in stunned silence as I made my way through the tables. Then slowly something unexpected happened. Someone started to applaud. Then another person joined in. By the time I reached James, who was standing with pride and admiration shining in his eyes, a significant portion of the room was clapping. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, James whispered as he took my hand. Together we walked toward the exit. Behind us, I could hear Eleanor's voice, strained and desperate, trying to regain control of the situation. If everyone could please take their seats, we'll continue with our planned program. But the damage was done. The carefully constructed facade had cracked, revealing the painful truth beneath. As James and I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I had finally put down a burden I had been carrying my entire adult life. Are you okay? James asked as we walked to the valet stand. I considered the question carefully. You know what? For the first time in a very long time, when it comes to my family, I actually am. The moment James and I were safely inside his car, the adrenaline that had been sustaining me began to fade. I leaned back against the leather seat and exhaled deeply, my hands trembling slightly in my lap. Rosa, James said softly, not starting the engine. What you just did in there was incredible. I turned to look at him, suddenly uncertain. Was it incredible Or was it a public meltdown that will haunt me forever? It was a woman finally speaking her truth after decades of being silenced, James replied firmly. You were composed, articulate, and dignified. You didn't yell or make accusations. You simply stated facts that everyone needed to hear. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. James pulled me into his arms as best he could across the center console, holding me while I released years of pent-up emotion. I can't believe I actually did that, I said when I could speak again. I've imagined standing up to her so many times, but I never thought I would actually do it. What changed tonight? I wiped my eyes, careful not to smear my makeup. When she said, "My only daughter," something just snapped inside me. It was like hearing her finally say out loud what she's been demonstrating my entire life. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid anymore. What was the worst she could do? Reject me? She'd already done that in front of 200 people. James started the car, and we drove in comfortable silence for a while. My phone began buzzing with notifications. Eleanor had called 3 times and left several text messages. How dare you embarrass me like that? You're being dramatic and making things worse. We need to talk. Call me immediately. I turned off my phone without responding. Whatever conversation needed to happen between my mother and me, it wouldn't be on her terms and timeline anymore. When we reached my apartment, James stayed over his protective presence, a comfort after such an emotionally draining evening. The next morning, I awoke to dozens more missed calls and messages, not just from Eleanor, but from Richard, Gabriella, and even relatives and family friends who had witnessed the confrontation. I decided to maintain my silence for a few days, giving myself space to process everything that had happened. I blocked Eleanor's number temporarily, needing a break from her attempts to control the narrative. Amelia came over that afternoon, having received a full report from James. She brought ice cream and listened as I recounted the events in detail. I'm so proud of you, she said when I finished. You know that's going to become legend in Boston society circles, right? Remember the Wallace Gala, where the secret daughter called out her mother on stage? Despite everything, I laughed. Not exactly how I planned to make my mark on Boston society. Say, maybe not, but it's a hell of a story. Amelia grew serious. What happens now with your family, I mean? I honestly don't know, I admitted. I can't imagine things ever going back to how they were. But maybe that's a good thing. The old dynamic was killing me slowly. 3 days after the gala, I received an unexpected call from Richard. Unlike Eleanor, he had respected my silence and waited for me to be ready. Rosa, he began, his voice heavy. I owe you an apology, not just for the gala, but for years of standing by while you were treated as less than you deserve. Why did you never say anything? I asked the question that had lingered for years, finally finding voice. Richard sighed deeply. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere between a mother and daughter, that Eleanor had her reasons, and that you seemed to be thriving despite it all. I convinced myself that providing financially was enough. He paused. I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry. Date as font. He went on to explain some context I had never known. Eleanor had suffered several miscarriages before having me and postpartum depression afterward. When my father left, she experienced it as a double abandonment and struggled to connect with me because I reminded her of him. None of that excuses how she's treated you, Richard said firmly. But I thought you should know there's more to the story than simply favouring Gabriella. Eleanor has her own wounds that she's never properly addressed. That helps me understand, but it doesn't heal the damage, I replied. I know, I just wanted you to have the full picture. He hesitated. For what it's worth, Eleanor hasn't been the same since the gala. She's barely left her room. I think in her own way she's finally confronting some hard truths. After speaking with Richard, I called Dr. Marshall and scheduled an emergency session. We spent 2 hours processing the gala confrontation and discussing healthy ways forward. Family estrangement is sometimes presented as a failure, Dr. Marshall observed, but in certain situations it can be the healthiest choice for everyone involved. The question is, what do you want your relationship with your mother to look like, moving forward if you want one at all? I didn't have an immediate answer, but the question became the framework for my thinking in the weeks that followed. My support system rallied around me during this time of uncertainty. James was a steady presence, never pushing me to make decisions, but providing unwavering support for whatever I chose. Amelia checked in daily sometimes, just sending funny memes to make me smile. My colleagues at the firm, sensing something was off, covered for me when I needed mental health days. 6 months after the gala, I ran into Gabriella at a coffee shop in downtown Boston. We spotted each other simultaneously, both freezing in momentary panic. After an awkward hesitation, she approached my table. "Can we talk for a minute?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. Curious despite myself, I nodded. Gabriella sat down, fidgeting with her engagement ring. "I wanted to tell you that Derek and I postponed the wedding." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said neutrally. "No, it's actually a good thing." She took a deep breath. After the gala, a lot of things changed. Mum and Richard started marriage counselling. Mum's seeing a therapist individually too. And I've been doing some reflecting on, well, everything. She looked directly at me for perhaps the first time in our lives. "I wasn't kind to you growing up. I was jealous that you were so smart, so naturally good at everything. It was easier to push you away than to compete with you." The admission was so unexpected that I didn't know how to respond. "Anyway," Gabriella continued, "I'm not asking for forgiveness or anything. I just wanted you to know that what you did at the gala, it needed to happen. It forced all of us to look at patterns nobody wanted to acknowledge." After that brief, surprising encounter, I received an even more unexpected delivery at my apartment, a handwritten letter from Eleanor. Unlike her demanding text immediately after the gala, this letter was reflective and seemed genuinely remorseful. "I have failed you as a mother in ways I am only beginning to understand," she wrote. "My therapist suggested I write to you not to ask for forgiveness that I haven't earned, but to acknowledge the hurt I've caused. You deserved a mother who celebrated your achievements, who made you feel valued and loved exactly as you are. I didn't give you that, and I am deeply sorry." She ended the letter by saying she would respect whatever boundaries I needed to set, including no contact if that was my preference. For the first time in my life, Eleanor seemed to be considering my needs above her own. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took time to consider what I truly wanted. I discussed the letter with Dr. Marshall, with James, with Amelia. I journaled extensively about my feelings. I meditated on possible futures with and without my mother in my life. As the one-year anniversary of the gala approached, my career reached new heights when I won the American Institute of Architects Young Architect Award for my work on the Harbour View project. The recognition came with significant media attention, including a profile in the Boston Globe that mentioned my design philosophy of creating spaces where everyone feels they belong. Richard sent a congratulatory bouquet with a warm note. Gabriella surprisingly shared the article on social media with a simple caption, "My talented stepsister." Eleanor sent nothing, continuing to respect the distance I had established. The success in my professional life paralleled growth in my personal life. James and I moved in together, blending our books, art and lives in a spacious apartment overlooking the Charles River. On a crisp autumn evening with the leaves changing colour outside our windows, he proposed with a simple, elegant ring that perfectly matched my taste. "You've shown me what courage looks like," he said as he slipped the ring onto my finger. "I want to spend my life with someone who knows her worth and isn't afraid to stand up for it." As we began planning our wedding, the question of family inevitably arose. Who would I invite? Would Eleanor have a role? Would I walk myself down the aisle? After much consideration, I decided to reach out to Eleanor. We met at a neutral location, a quiet tea room downtown, both of us nervous and uncertain. "Thank you for meeting me," I said as we settled at a corner table. Eleanor looked older, somehow the confident society matron replaced by someone more vulnerable. "Thank you for being willing to see me." Our conversation was halting, at first, both of us carefully navigating the new terrain between us. I didn't pretend that one meeting could erase decades of hurt, and to her credit, neither did she. "I'm getting married," I told her eventually. "James is a good man," she replied. "I could see how much he cares for you, even at the gala." "I haven't decided yet what role, if any, I want family to play in the wedding." Eleanor nodded, accepting this without protest. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that I'm proud of you, Rosa, not just for your professional success, but for your strength of character. You became an extraordinary woman without my help, and perhaps even despite my failures. It wasn't an instant reconciliation. There was no tearful embrace or magical healing of all wounds. But it was a beginning, a fragile foundation for whatever might come next. As I left the tea room that day, I realized something profound: my worth had never depended on my mother's acknowledgement. The validation I had sought from her for so long was something I had always possessed within myself. The journey from that painful gala night to where I stand today hasn't been straightforward. There have been steps forward and back, moments of doubt and clarity. I've learned that healing isn't linear, and that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean forgetting or returning to unhealthy patterns. What I know now is this family isn't defined solely by blood or legal ties. It's created through love, respect, and mutual support. James, Amelia, my colleagues, my neighbours, they became my chosen family when my biological one failed me. And while I'm cautiously rebuilding a relationship with my mother and stepsister, it's on new terms with clear boundaries. The scared girl who once desperately sought her mother's approval has become a woman who understands her own value. That night at the gala, when I finally spoke my truth, wasn't just about confronting my mother. It was about reclaiming my story and my right to exist fully in the world. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever swallowed your truth to keep the peace, if you've ever diminished yourself to fit someone else's narrative, I want you to know that you deserve more. Speaking your truth may not change others, but it will undoubtedly change you. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to diminish your worth? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. Hit the like button if this story resonated with you, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in their struggle. Remember, the family we choose can be just as meaningful as the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to claim your own voice and worth.